Today we are working on the 1 litre K11 Micra. Today we will be replacing the radiator, as you can see in the background, and we'll also be replacing the thermostat and changing all the coolant. So, first things first, I've jacked it up on one side. I'm just going to take off there's a little bit of under tray there underneath the bumper. I'm going to take that off and then drain out the coolant, job number one. Just got to take off this lower clamp. I just like to take them off until they're really loose. Sometimes they get a little bound up. Yeah, there we go. Just slide it right out of the way. Now he's going to get our bucket. Okay, so we made a little bit of a mess underneath. While that's draining, we're going to start removing the radiator, which involves taking off this strap. Well, I don't know what it is. Just like basically this bracing bar here connects the two wings. We're going to take all of that out, and we're also going to have to disconnect the overflow tank from the radiator itself, and also the upper radiator hose. And there used to be a bolt holding this in. I don't know where that went, but it hasn't been here for ages, so I think it might have snapped off actually. Yep, snapped off. Typical Japanese. Right, let's crack on. So in order to remove the that bracing bar at the top, it is also connected by these two 12s here, which we shall now try to whip out. These are the bonnet catch bolts. Get out my gun. There we go. Now that should be free to move, and yet it isn't. What else are you held in by? Oh, is it one more at the bottom, is it? I'll try and make sure these are all aligned properly. All the bolts are exactly the same. We do need to be careful there, it goes back together just so. That cable is obviously your bonnet cable. That just clicks back into it. I'll show you that later. For now, let's see if we can get this thing out. You see we've got a little bit more movement now. We need to get the horn off, and I think we need to remove at least one of the headlights, maybe both. Okay, so new development. You don't actually need to take off this section here. It's just held on by some sealant. I've broken the seal on that. It's not really very tough stuff. So what I'm going to do is remove these two here. I believe they look like 10 mils. They look a bit weak as well, so I'm going to give them a spritz with some WD-40. And I'm going to wind those out with a 10 and see what happens. So once those two bolts are removed, you should just be able to remove that to one side. And there we have our prize. Don't think this was held in by anything other than the... it's got a fan on it. Right, we're going to have to disconnect the fan first. Come on, Nissan, there's like always one more thing with you, like Columbo. Okay, so we're going to have to whip that off, move that over, blah, 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 more bolts, more work, more clips, yeah, here we go. So how do you know if a radiator is leaking? Well, rust is always a bad sign. You see this pinky stuff? That is coolant. So I would say that it had rusted out and had started leaking a little bit in those areas. No real pinky stuff there. More pinky stuff. Fair bit of damage up there in that corner, and then more rust. So this radiator was absolutely toast, which explains in some ways why this engine was overheating slightly. Obviously we've got to move the mounts over and the fan over to the new radiator. But before we start messing around with any of that stuff, let's just have a look at this thermostat housing, which now we've got plenty of access to get to. So I reckon that what we should do is take this out next. We'll take the hoses off, take the housing out, apart from the upper radiator hose that can sort of just stay on there. All the other ones have got to come off, then the housing's got to come out, and then we will see what our thermostat looks like. You can see this was leaking loads of coolant here. I've bought a new thermostat anyway because they're cheap, but it might have just been a case of just loads of tiny little coolant leaks all over the shop. We'll find out. So upon further inspection, it does appear to me that just the front here is the actual thermostat housing, which I will confirm in a minute. And then it looks like this is just some sort of coolant passage, you know, joint where all the hoses come together. In any case, I'm glad I took it apart because I wanted to, I mean, these pipes are definitely going to be worth cleaning up before I put it all back together, just to make sure that I get a proper seal. There'd be no point in replacing the thermostat if that part there is all junk. So onwards and upwards. Yeah, so that's basically where the thermostat lives. So it lives just behind that little housing there. This is our thermostat, which I just dropped into a tank of coolant, and that is whatever it is that is behind the thermostat, which looks shiny, I suppose. It's nice. And our thermostat just went in there. But it doesn't matter because it was old and broken and we didn't want it anyway. So we're going to put in a nice shiny new one. If you want to fix your own car, this is the kind of thing that you will have to contend with, and that is that you can see one bolt lines up, one bolt lines up. Oh look, number 3 doesn't line up. Oh, amazing, so good. I mean, obviously this is like the most useless thing because I can't fit it, and if I drill a hole in it, the warranty will be void. And I also think that if I drill a hole in that it will cut into the ridged side there, which is supposed to flatten out when you crush it to make a nice seal. Every other seal that came with this particular kit is a flat 2-bolt seal. None of these are useful to me. None of them. So I have an option. I either make my own seal, or I drill out this one, or I take it back. So I don't know what I'm going to do yet. So unfortunately the original part that I got didn't fit. So I had to get a cheaper one, which has one of these multi-gaskets in it. I hate these because they look so ugly. But it does fit, just about. Now I could trim off the excess. I'm not going to bother, I'm just going to leave it exactly as it is. It's pretty much going to be hidden anyway. And now it is just a case of connecting back up the hoses. Just a case of connecting back up the hoses. And then we will be good to go. Fill it back up. Chuck the radiator in. Okay, so when removing the fan shroud from the old radiator, it is held on by these two, I believe that they are PH3s. Now I tried to undo these with this. You can see it skips really easily. I would not recommend using a screwdriver. Instead, with the appropriate bit, same on this side here. There we go. Whip those out. Now put those to one side so you don't get lost. Now the fan should just lift off. There we go. It sits in a little grommet there at the bottom. Has a little peg on it, so we'll pop that to one side with our new radiator. We will also need going to need that, and going to need this one here. They just pull straight off, they will pop onto the new one, and there is nothing to the top because the top one goes into the ones that are already in here. So let's swap that over and then pop this in, fill her up. So now that the radiator and the fan are fitted, all we need to do now is connect up the hoses, put this little bracey flip-it thing back on, and then it is time to put in the fluid at long last. So just pop the lower radiator hose on, which is now in place, and that goes onto the thermostat housing. I've just tightened it up until it was about tight, I guess. I mean, it doesn't slide off, so I'm happy with that. Now we are going up top. Well, this hose here looks symmetrical, so I'm kind of thinking that it doesn't matter which way it goes on. But we are about to find out. Let's get that on there like that, and then slide that on there like that. There you go. And then just make sure that when you angle these hose clamps, if they're still a little bit tight, you just wiggle them. That one there's still like too tight. You need to undo that a little bit. yeah, basically just need to slide them back on. That's more like it. Too far. There we go. Come back. And then just make sure that you can always get to the bolt head easily. And then you just tighten them up. I mean, these are a bit rusted. You could replace them. I'm going to try and reuse them because I've been going through Jubilee clamps like you wouldn't believe. So if these fail, I'll chuck on some Jubilees. But otherwise, I'm going to try and reuse them. So I have just continued to fill the radiator until it's basically started to back up into the funnel here, and I have not bled anything yet, so this is just me pouring in the coolant. I do it very slowly to try and avoid any air pockets, and then what I do is grab this hose, give it a squeeze. See that air? So that's air in the system. As you bleed out the air, as you pump that out, the fluid will drop. I also have a bucket underneath, so if I lose any coolant, I'd rather lose sort of like half a cup's worth of coolant than end up with air left in the system. So this is what I'm going to do. Just going to continue bleeding out the air at the top, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing with the bottom radiator hose and try and bleed out some more air. And then after that, I'll start the engine. I will put the fans on hot and on maximum just to pull some of the coolant through the system, probably for like 20 seconds. Then I'll shut it off, come back, do the same thing again with both hoses. Then I'll run it up to operating temperature, which is like who knows what in this car, but I don't really care. I know exactly what it's supposed to look like on the dial, and that's what's important. Just another little tip. So basically, there is a bolt here that holds on the air conditioning pipe, and that has sheared off quite a long time ago. So this bracket here used to face around this way here and was on the metal, and I think that was creating quite a rattle when the car was at idle. Same thing here. So this O2 sensor has a random bracket here which used to bolt onto here like that. That has rusted out and snapped off. So what I have done is I've cable tied it up here out of the way so that they're both clear, and then I'm going to see if the rattle's gone, and if it is, that'll be absolutely mint, because rattles when you're driving are very irritating. So I've put in many litres of coolant, probably about 3 and a bit, so probably will need a little bit more unless there was some left in the block. Just start it, let it idle, give it a little bit of throttle. That'll do. And now we'll go and check the level once more. Yeah, you can see our coolant has dropped a fair old amount, and then we'll do the same thing again. More air in the system. Kind of looks like the coolant's just jumping up and down, so we'll leave that there, and then we'll do the same thing with the lower one, and then we will see where the level's at. Okay, and now we just let her run until she gets up to temperature, and then we will have to take her for a spin to make sure it doesn't overheat, make sure we got all the air out of the system, make sure the coolant is topped off, and hopefully the rattle is also gone, which would be great. Well, that is it for the Micra for today. It is running, it's not overheating, taking it out, it has been fine, there are no leaks, so we are calling this one done.